Hi, thanks for joining me. I'm Carl Seibert. In this video, we're going to look at some metadata decisions and some digital asset management decisions in two practical scenarios. One, a very simple situation, and one, seemingly, a very complicated situation. We'll start with simple. We're here in Adobe Lightroom, and we're looking at a folder full of files of close-ups of flowers. Now, originally these were shot as a demo, but they've kind of been repurposed. They're family photos. They're photos from our garden at our house. There are about 75 photos here. That's kind of a modest size shoot, but it's probably more pictures of flowers in our garden, many of which are redundant, than I have any use for. So we need to do some editing. And I'm a photo editor. I can't really complain about that. So let's do some editing. We'll see that some of these photos have ratings. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. I edited them. So there we go. If we go to all of our 2-star photos, we have our selects. And we can see here that our original photos are all Nikon NEF RAW formats. And we can see that for each select, I went ahead and saved out a rendition file. These are JPEGs, but they could have been TIFFs or PSDs or whatever. JPEGs are going to be good for our purposes here because they don't take up much disk space. And because the original use for these photos, I believe they were in fact used as JPEGs. So I made these JPEGs in Photoshop. If you're working in Lightroom, you have the choice. You can do it in Photoshop. You can do it as an export. Either way, they're going to be really useful to us because, well, you can, in fact, mark up a RAW file in Lightroom with metadata. It isn't exactly the smoothest operation ever. Most RAW formats don't take metadata at all. This particular TIFF-based NEF file would, but most software treats camera RAW files, and most photographers treat camera RAW files as read-only. And I kind of fall in that camp. I don't really even want to rename them, much less open them up and try to save metadata in them. So I have Lightroom and Photo Mechanic set to save metadata for RAW files as sidecar XMP files. Sidecar XMP files are just fine as long as they stay associated with their parent files. But sometimes they get moved to another folder, something gets renamed, they get deleted, they get disassociated. So I don't want to depend on that for preserving the metadata that goes along with these photos. Thus, the JPEGs are a good choice. I also don't want to clutter up my family photo collection with 75 outtakes of flower close-ups. So all the outtakes are going to go live outside of Lightroom in an external drive. In the external drive, outside of Lightroom, these JPEGs will serve to preserve that data. If you access these photos by navigating to them in the external drive, you see all the outtakes. You also see all the selects, all marked up with metadata. So that'll work out just fine for us. Now, what are we actually going to mark up here? Well, let's see. Well, first, before we even go to our first JPEG, we will note that my name has already been put in the author, creator, photographer, byline, whatever you want to call it field. And the copyright field has a copyright notice from me as well. Those things were actually written by my camera. They were written in EXIF data, and each one of these NEF files actually has those two little pieces of minimal metadata. Now, let's go to a JPEG file. Now this JPEG file and all of its friends, we're going to mark up with proper metadata for our purposes so that we can find the file later. And that's mostly all we're trying to do. These are my photos. They don't live in any system outside of my own. And my needs strictly relate to being able to find them later and know what was going on many years from now. So it's not the most complicated of situations. So let's take this file and let's apply a template to it. We're going to use our Joe Photographer demo template. These are, in fact, duplicates of these files, so I can do anything I want to them. I have these in a demo folder. Now, straight off the bat, we popped on Joe's template, and we see an anomaly. My name appeared in the creator field. And that's because of the way Lightroom treats EXIF data. It's just a glitch. We'll go down here and we'll check just to make sure, and we'll make sure that the copyright string from our template was correctly applied, and it was. Now we have Joe's template here, and we can see, if I turn on my little highlighter, we can see that most of the fields in Joe's template are things that stay the same for every photo that Joe does. Now these are all important fields, but we're just not going to have to worry about them because they always stay the same. Now here in the description field, which is also the caption field, we've got Joe's inline byline already there waiting for us. Once again, unless Joe changes his name, he's not going to have to change that field at all. These are just close-ups of flowers. So pretty much every picture in this shoot has elements that are going to be the same in its caption. And every picture in this shoot is going to get keyworded, but the same rules apply. It's going to be the same set of keywords for every picture that we're going to do here. So that's going to make that simple enough. We know we're going to have to do a caption for every picture. Part of it's going to be boilerplate for the whole shoot. And then the most important part, we're going to have to identify the flowers because that's the kind of thing we need to know later. We need to know what flowers these are. If I ever need a picture of a lobster claw heliconia, here is one, and that in fact is what's selected right now. So let's look at fields we might use, but probably won't. Well, we won't because we've already made this decision. A headline field. Do I need a headline for these photos? No. In my experience, by the way, information that's in the headline field is almost always duplicative of information that's in the caption. And, the subject code, the category, we have a whole bunch of things in here that we just don't need. In certain circumstances, we might for certain clients, but we don't here. Doesn't matter whether it's a field that we would have to fill out for every picture or one that's pre-filled for us because we don't need them. The title or object name field, very often that's the same as the file name, and that can even be automated in some software. You either need it or you don't. It could be handy for a number of things, but if you don't need it, don't bother with it. Job identifier, ditto. Special instructions, that's usually a templated field. You either need them or you don't. Credit line, that's who you work for. If you're working for yourself, never mind. So let's see, what have we counted up here? How many fields are we going to have to fill out for this thing? Well, basically, one. We'll do one pass that puts boilerplate in the caption, and then we'll go back and we will caption each picture. We're also going to do keywords. Keywords are optional. You may need them. You may not need them. We're going to do them. And again, we're not going to sweat about it real much because it's not going to take us much time. Now, we have our photos. We've sorted. In this case, they're actually sorted by add order, but we've basically sorted by file name by default. And we can see that our heliconia raw is sitting next to our heliconia rendition. And we can see that that's happened because the file name that I put on the rendition actually starts out with the base file name from the raw photo. So it's going to sort properly in pretty much any software or in your operating system's file manager. And these photos will remain associated with each other. And the renditions have distinctive file names, which is a good thing. You might not be able to do that. You might have to do something else to keep your RAWs and your renditions associated with each other. And in fact, that object name field might come in real handy for that. You could fill your raw file name in the object name field and apply it to your rendition file, which could be a master file. It could be a file that you're sending out for distribution. Different people call it different things. And content lifestyle management is another topic for another day. So let's go ahead and just do this. We've got Joe's template assigned here. Let's switch to our caption view in Lightroom. And we will go to the same caption that I used when I used the same set of photos for a video on bulk caption edits. We'll just type that in, or paste that in there. So here we have a caption that describes what's going on. It's late afternoon, the light's nice, and I did this thing in the garden. And there are search terms in this caption that I'm likely to think of later when I go back to look for these pictures. And that's why I suggest that you write your captions in complete sentences as you speak or as you write. If you do that, you'll automatically use the same kind of language that you'll probably use or other people might use when they go to search for your photos. So there we go. And we have a string of X's here where the name of each particular plant goes. So let's apply this to all of our pictures. And in order to do that, we will save a little time. We'll redo our sort. We'll put all the JPEGs at the top of this folder. And we will select them all in one go. Wait, let's not do that. We will deselect them. We will go back to the first one that we applied our template to, because I just remembered we didn't apply our template to all of them. We will copy it from there. There we go. So now it's on Lightroom's clipboard. Now we go back, we select the rest of the photos, we paste in our metadata. There it goes. Now, all the photos now have our base template, and they have the base caption that has everything except the specific name of each individual flower. And I said we were going to keyword these because in my collection of family photos, there are a lot of photos that have no metadata other than keywords, which is not necessarily a good thing, but I suspect it's probably the same in your collection of family photos, maybe even in your collection of professional photos. So keywords are real important here. So let's do some keywords. It is a family photo. It's a house and home photo. It's a garden photo. It's a picture of flowers. And we'll put Bonnie's name in here too. Now, you should choose your keywords. You should not type your keywords. Don't freehand keywords. You run the risk, if you do that, of using keywords that don't match your standard, your controlled vocabulary. And there's an example here. In the 20 years that I've had this collection, I'm pretty sure that a few times, a few hundred times maybe, I've typed in house instead of home for this particular keyword. You remember when I said it's a house and home picture? That's the way it is in the folder taxonomy. Folder is house and home. For keywords, by convention, I've decided that these things should be home. So I should always choose my keywords instead of trying to remember them or thinking them up on the spot to make sure that they stay consistent, that I maintain a controlled vocabulary. And yeah, I could probably put in a synonym of house for home. And indeed, I probably need to do that for many of my family pictures because of a little indiscipline there in my keywording before I learned. So learn from my hard experience so it doesn't become your hard experience. Isn't that inspirational? Okay, so there we go. Now we have keywords assigned to all these pictures as well. Now we should be able, if we click off and we click back on to one given photo, we should be able to go down here and name that plant. And this is a lobster claw heliconia. And hopefully I can click off that. Whew. I don't know what Lightroom was doing to me there. It was trying to help out. And that's probably only because I rehearsed this presentation and it knows that heliconia comes after lobster and claw. I don't know. Anyway, there we go. So that plant is identified. So there we go. We've identified that plant. Let's move over to the next plant. And this is an African iris. Now, I'm not making this up as I go along, and I don't know anything about plants, so I will confess to you that I have a cheat sheet that tells me. So I do that. I step through all the plants. There's 16 of them. It's not going to take a tremendously long time, especially if I actually know what they are. And we're done. Or, well, we're almost done. I need to, before we go, select all these photos, this being Lightroom, and here we are, write the metadata into the files. Otherwise, the metadata only exists in Lightroom's database, and it won't do us any good. Now, you can automate that. You can set Lightroom to always write your metadata into your files as you go along, or you can semi-automate it. You can use a smart collection that will gather up all of your files that haven't had the latest metadata change written in them and do them in one go. Either way, it's not going to do you any good until the metadata is written into the files. Because remember, these files are going to get copied immediately off to an external hard drive. And if the metadata doesn't go with them, it will be kind of a hollow gesture. So remember to write your metadata in Lightroom before you go. Now, that was a pretty simple scenario. It was a pretty small shoot. It was straightforward. I'm the photographer. I'm the client. Lightroom is my editing application. It's also my digital asset management application. Couldn't get much simpler than that, right? Well, now let's go to the other end of the spectrum altogether. Let's go to a hockey game. Here we are. Here we are looking at a hockey game between the Florida Panthers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. This was shot by the sports photographer, Elliot Schechter, who happens, among other things, to be the house photographer for the Florida Panthers. Now, the way this works in today's world, news organizations have diminishing resources, so they very often can't cover themselves everything they want to cover. And sports leagues, like the NHL, like NASCAR, have discovered that it's a really nice idea if they hire real-life sports photojournalists to cover their events and then provide those pictures to everyone. And they partner with wire services to do that in the case of the NHL and also NASCAR, I think. Getty Images is the wire service that handles the distribution of these photos. So these photos are going to get shot. They're going to be edited, and then they're going to be transmitted to Elliot's clients, Getty Images and the National Hockey League. And then from there, they're going to be distributed to all kinds of people, all kinds of different news organizations and websites and whatnot. And in all of those places, all up and down the line, including Elliot's own company, these photos need to be managed. They will go into digital asset management systems of one sort or another, either fancy computerized database sorts of affairs, or in Elliot's case, they're going to live on an external hard drive in his office. Now, Elliot and just about every other sports photographer in the world works in a files and folders environment. You shoot your assignments, you turn in your assignment, and then you move on to the next thing. Elliot himself is not in the archiving business, so he needs to be able to find these photos manually, and his clients are probably all going to use computerized digital asset management, systems to keep track of them. So we have metadata that's going to have to serve four masters: Elliot, the Hockey League, the wire service, and whoever receives the photos in their own systems. So that's a pretty tall order, metadata-wise. So let's look at the workflow here too. Now, on this particular assignment, Elliot shot 2,586 frames. So we're not talking about 75 pictures of flowers here. We're talking about a lot of stuff. And he has to keep it in order and be very organized about this, because many of these frames will be distributed while the game is still going on and shortly after. And as it turns out, in this particular case, if we look at the folders ready for immediate transmission, there are 30 of them. So that's a lot of work that has to be done really quickly. As cards come back from Elliot near the ice to Elliot's assistant, he ingests them with Photo Mechanic's ingest function and puts them in these folders here. They're organized according to card run. Each handful of cards or each individual card goes in a folder. Now, when he does that, we will look in one of these folders, this one. When he does that, as part of his ingest process, he applies templated metadata. Now, you remember all these outtakes are going to live on an external hard drive. They're not going to be indexed into a database. So it's not going to hurt us in any way whatsoever in our template to put in specific information that is specific to this particular game. And here we go. Let's look in our caption. Our caption has a dateline. It has an inline byline, just like our Joe Photographer template did. It has some housekeeping nonsense that's specific to Getty. And it has this sentence fragment. At the BB&T Center on December 8th, 2016 in Sunrise, Florida. And that's like our boilerplate in the flower instance. What they're going to do, Elliot and his assistant, as they edit and prepare photos, is each one is going to have a one-sentence caption where the part that is individual to each photo is the first half of that sentence. So they're minimizing their work as much as they possibly can. And they have to, because they have to go really fast. Next up, we have a headline for the game. 4 levels down, a lot of those clients are going to need that headline. So Elliot and his assistant are giving it to them. It's not a particular problem because 2,600 photos, more or less, get done in one stroke. It's in the template. Keywords. These are provided by the NHL, and Elliot tells me. Right here, we have the NHL's serial number for the game. And the rest of these keywords, I'm sort of assuming are a service to downstream clients. Because in the NHL's database, pretty sure every picture is probably a sports picture. I'm very sure that every picture has something to do with the NHL itself, and their business is pretty much ice hockey. Leaving only this keyword here in doubt, because I'm sure that they have pictures of executives and coaches and trainers and stuff too. Okay, fine. Moving along. Byline. This field that identifies Elliot's relationship to Getty as a contributor. That's for Getty's benefit. It's not something that you'll probably ever really need to do. Copyright string as per the NHL. Here is the credit. That's who you work for. And if you're working for yourself, you're not going to have to worry about it. But it's no biggie here either, because every game that Elliot shoots for the NHL is the same. It's in the template. Source. That too is a wire service thing. Wire services want their clients to understand where pictures came from, if they were given to the wire service, as these are, as opposed to being created on the spot. Here we have that object name field that we talked about earlier. We have the job ID transmission ref field, and in this particular case, that's just for Elliot's benefit himself. This object name field is going to end up being the file name of the finished file. So it's a cut and paste job, or perhaps it's even easier. We have some category information, supplemental category information. The subcat is deprecated, but it's still used in the news industry. So there you go. Every photo that comes in the door, so to speak, is already marked up with that information. And edited photos that are going to be transmitted on the wire need only receive that sentence fragment, which identifies the people and it identifies what they're doing. Everything else here is in the template until we get down to the title object name field. And as you can see, it matches, whoops, can't select that. But as you can see, it matches the file name of this finished file. So it's a cut and paste job, but let's just mess it up here a little bit, and we'll see how easy it is to do this if you don't want to cut and paste. We're going to take and we're going to replace that string that's in there with the file name base variable. Whoops, make that go away. With the file name base variable, we will OK that caption. And there you have it. We've automatically filled in that field. Now, there are some considerations about doing that. If you apply that variable early on, you're going to get the camera file name, not the file name that you want. But that's manageable. And I won't go into all of the workflow techniques here, but it becomes a workflow technique thing. If you wanted to do that in bulk, you could do all 30 of these photos in one stroke. If you were to do it one at a time, just like I did it there, it'd be just as easy to cut and paste. But anyway, that's all that needs to be done. 1/2 of a sentence per photo, and it's ready to go in the most complicated metadata situation that I can imagine, where you have 4 levels of clients that are using the metadata in somewhat different ways. You have to accommodate them all, and you have to do it really, really fast. Now, 30 of these photos were transmitted as the game was going on and shortly thereafter. In the ensuing hours, sometime probably the next morning, here's another 50 photos that were moved from this same game. And in total, there were 88 photos, including 8 pictures of a special request, that were moved from this game. So efficiency was a really helpful thing when you're dealing with this kind of scale. But at the end of the day, doing the metadata wasn't any harder than doing our flower metadata. It really didn't take much work at all. So there you have it. Some metadata considerations, some digital asset management considerations, and some just plain don't make the job any harder than it needs to be considerations. And this thing becomes really pretty easy. Now, your situation could be entirely different. It could be different from day to day for different shoots. But the principles are all pretty much the same. If you think it through first, make some intelligent choices based on your workflow and your archiving needs, you'll be able to work out a system that turns minimum effort into maximum value. Once again, I'm Carl Seibert. Thanks for joining me. Please reach out in the comments here or on my blog. And until next time, mind your metadata.